Right, straight into chapter 15. Finn saw it at the same time his father did, a diamond spinning to a stop beside the hard leather ball that had only seconds before been a hodboon. This was smaller than the one that Finn had picked up after his encounter with the Minotaur, but it looked sharper. His father casually tossed the ball of legend to Finn, who juggled it before getting hold of it against his chest, then punched in the code for a container he was holding and placed it inside. In the meantime, his father had picked up the diamond and was quietly examining it. "What was it?" asked Finn. "Some kind of diamond," his father replied slowly. "No, I mean, what did he say? About me?" "Oh, he didn't say anything about you." "Yes, he did. He looked at me and said the boy. He wasn't looking at you at the time. It was definitely me. And he said I would fall." "It was about all of us," said his father. "No, it was if he recognised me." "Maybe you're a big celebrity on the infested side," said his dad. "He probably got you in the Legend Hunter's collector's card." "It was just a trick, Finn, a delaying tactic. Give these legends a hand and they'll take an arm." They both knew this was literally so in the infamous case of Graham, the one-armed legend hunter. Bruni's knife, a harmless piece, barely capable of slicing paper, remained where it had fallen. Finn picked it up and handed it to his father, who was hardly interested in it. "That doesn't matter, Finn. This crystal is more important," his father said, studying it. "You saw the desiccator swallow him pretty well. So why was this left behind? He must have dodged at the last moment. I couldn't have been any closer to him. He didn't move." Finn shrugged, dropped his gaze, tried not to betray what he already knew. The Minotaur had been hit full on with the desiccator, and a crystal had been left behind there too. He should have told his dad at the time. He should tell him now, but he reckoned his father would desiccate him on the spot if he knew he'd been hiding a precious jewel from him. "This," his dad continued, still focused on the jewel, "is the first thing I've seen survive the desiccator net intact. It was definitely on his hand. I spotted it, where his little finger should have been, but just presumed it was some sort of declaration. Hodboons are thieving little beggars. He must have lost the finger at some point and used this as an artificial one." "You're sure it's not a diamond?" asked Finn. His father turned it over in his hand. "I don't know, Finn, but there's someone who will know." Alright, chapter 16. It was a very short chapter, that one. The shop was hidden down one of Dartmouth's narrow laneways. Finn had been there before, but not since he was younger, when he would be brought along this street by his dad and left to wait outside on the step, where weathered paint peeled from the shop front in the sharp, fat flakes. Finn had never been inside. The red lettering on the sign outside the door was almost, but not entirely, faded, and it read, "Electronic repairs, Mr. Ladd, sales specialities." Specialities? Nothing about this shop looked special from the outside. Its windows were caked with grime, and anyone peering inside could see that the store was overflowing with odds and ends, parts and odd electrical, guts of televisions, remnants of toasters, gaping inside of CD players. The clutter spilled onto the laneway at the front of the shop. Cardboard boxes filled to the brim with tiny fuses, plugs, trailing cords, old and worn radios, and ancient photographs. Finn's father paused at the door, crouching down to pick through a box. "Oh, I love this shop," he said, as he stood up with what looked like a dusty old computer game in his hands. "You never know what you're going to find." "I wonder why," said Finn, with so much sarcasm as possibly the case could be. "You'll be surprised what you can find if you know what you're looking for," his dad replied, a touch of glee in his voice. He tossed the game at Finn. "Come on, it's about time you were properly introduced to my old friend." Finn felt a flash of excitement as he followed his dad. He had never before crossed the threshold. Instead, his memories were all of sitting on the pavement outside, or playing along the lane, barely seen silhouettes shuffling about inside. His father greeted another man, a mumbled discussion, the occasional glance towards Finn before they disappeared. Now finally inside, his excitement turned to disappointment. He could see the place was as messy as the exterior had probably been. Wire hoops hung from the walls, disembodied screens dangling from ceilings, and towers of dusty DVD players teetered on the floor. "What do you want one of those for? Old Space Invader games?" Finn's dad called out. "Some bread would be nice," came the reply. A man appeared behind the counter. Finn had noticed him amid the clutter. He hadn't even noticed the counter. "Business that bad, old man?" continued Finn's father. "Business that bad, old man?" continued his father. The shopkeeper grunted. He looked as worn out as the electronics scattered about the place. His dark, unkempt hair hung like black spaghetti past his ears. His suit was frayed at the edges, and his fingers were the yellow of old newspapers. "Well, I might have something interesting for you, Glad," said Finn's dad, gently placing the diamond on the countertop. Mr. Glad didn't acknowledge it, but instead fixed his glare on Finn. "Your boy has grown, Hugo. I haven't seen him since he was small, waiting on the step outside. Well, since he was smaller than is, let me have a look at him." Stretching out both hands, he grabbed Finn. By the back of the skull. Startled, Finn wasn't sure if he was under threat, but wasn't really in a position to riddle free anyway. Mr. Glad turns Finn's head one way, then the other, examining him like a vet would in search of a dog for fleas. "Will he be complete?" he asked, as if Finn didn't have a voice of his own. Finn's father pushed up his lower lip in an attempt to exude confidence. "3 successful hunts done yet?" Finn's dad waddled a hand in not quite there gesture. Mr. Glad kept hold of Finn for a few more seconds. Under his grip, Finn thought his head might crack open like an egg, letting his brain ooze out. It would be a welcome release. "It'll have to do, I suppose," Mr. Glad snorted in a way that didn't convey much satisfaction. Then realised Finn, who rubbed the back of his skull where a bruise was already heating up. "Now, what's this you have for me?" asked Mr. Glad, picking up the object and examining it. "I'm not sure," said Finn's dad, "but it looked like a diamond. A hodboon came through the gate a short while ago and left it behind." "Where's the hodboon now?" "In the car, doing a good impression of a stone." And did he say anything?" "He didn't really get a chance." "He's some man, your father," said Glad, addressing Finn. "I've known him since we were boys, and your mother too. We all grew up in this godforsaken town. He went his way, I went mine." Finn hid his surprise that his parents and Mr. Glad were the same age. Time had treated them quite differently. "Your father did some extraordinary things when we were young," said Mr. Glad. "Has he told you about the day he fought?" "Yes," said Finn wearily, because he had heard the same stories over and over. "And the time he invented—" "Oh, yep, that too," said Finn. "Well, then we're in agreement." Mr. Glad turned and passed through a curtain of beads behind him. Before following, Finn's father stopped and bent down to Finn. "You want to know what those specialities are? Well, you're about to find out." He pushed aside the beads, beckoning Finn through into the back room. Much to Finn's surprise, in the back room there was order. It was not necessarily neat, nor was it any brighter or more cheerful than the shop. Yet as Finn looked closer, he began to see a strong semblance of organisation. The floor could be seen and actually walked on without fear of tripping on a fossilised tape recorder. There was even a bed roughly made in one corner. But it was the equipment that most caught Finn's attention. One wall was lined with shields of various sizes, some with spikes around their rim or protruding from the middle. On another hung parts of armour, a breastplate, a pair of iron trousers, and a steel cup that Finn knew was particularly important for protecting the vital bits of male legend hunters. On the shelves were a variety of objects, including triggers, handles, tubes, small boxes with fat wires, and fat boxes with small wires. Specialities, thought Finn. His attention was caught by what looked like a long fork with 2 prongs and smaller blades just jutting from them. Mr. Ladd seemed to notice his interest and handed it to him for a closer look. "It's a tooth extractor," he said. "If you get bitten by a legend, you don't want to leave any stray teeth in there. Poison, you see. It'll gradually worm its way down into your skin and seep deep into the tissue. Then it will turn rotten and eat away at your flesh, so that you're left in terrible agony for hours or days unless..." Mr. Ladd leaned into Finn. "Shloop! You pop it out with one of these. It's a proper relief when you do, trust me." He tucked his hair behind his right ear. Finn could just make out the edge of a scar on his temple. It was deep and circular, with 2 small punches on either side. He looked at the prongs of the tooth extractor, then back at the scar. Mr. Ladd let the hair fall back over his ear and moved away. Finn glanced at his father and raised his eyebrows in silent question. "Mr. Ladd is, what's known as a fixer," said his dad. "What do you fix?" asked Finn. "Whatever it is you need," answered Mr. Ladd. "Mr. Ladd had been a fixer for a long time, Finn," said his father, "and he's one of the best." "And one of the last," interjected Mr. Ladd, sitting down on a rusted seat at a large desk by the wall. "Civilians can't become legend hunters, but some of us have found other ways to become useful." Travelling the blighted villages, making weapons, fixing equipment, sourcing material. It's not what you'd call an official role. The 12 like to keep us hidden, as you can see. He gestured at his surroundings. Finn stared at Mr. Ladd, trying to figure out how to react. He felt his dad watching him, waiting for his reaction, willing for it to be positive. "Interesting," said Finn, because he reckoned he should say something. Mr. Ladd opened a wooden drawer and lifted out a brass microscope. He placed it on the desk and opened a cap on its lens, before giving it a once-over. "I used to move about a bit. It was best of times. It was the bloodiest of times and all that," he said. "Soon neither of us might be needed any more, unless you plan to keep us in business." He paused for a moment before slapping his knees in an unexpectedly cheery gesture. But such is the small price of a great victory. Now let's take a look at this diamond, or whatever it might be, before we get chewed up by nostalgia. Mr. Ladd placed an edge of the crystal just below the lens. The only sound was the rattle of his breath as he examined it. "Well, it's not a diamond, I can tell you that straight away," he announced, sitting back and inviting Finn and his father to have a look. "I don't believe that diamonds dance like that, do you?" End of chapter 16. Dancing diamonds, eh?